Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for ArcVision's digital event, where we are teamed up with ITOOSOFT for the ultimate environment creation with ITOOSOFT. I'm Kelsey Kolbenschlag. I'm Sales Operations Manager here at ArcVision. With me today, I have Corey Rubidoux, CEO of ArcVision, Jaime Parga, Marketing Manager with ITOOSOFT, and Paul Roberts, Training Manager with ITOOSOFT. The team here today is going to be taking you over some of the fundamentals of scene assembly and environment creation, emphasizing with RailClone and ForestPack. It's going to be a really exciting time as we dive a little bit deeper into those. And just a few things to remind you about as we get started here. We are not using the chat feature today. We will be using Q&A. So if you have something that comes up you want to ask, we may have an opportunity to get to it during the demo. If not, we will get to all questions for sure, and during Q&A at the end, where all four of us are going to chime back in to get as much as we can answered for you. If you have, like I said, any questions, and afterwards we will provide email addresses that you can reach back out to us later. So and you will see a few poll questions as well pop up during the next probably about 40 minutes. We invite you to participate with those so that we can capture some information, helps us to get to know you all, as well as get to fine-tune some of the ideas for future digital events. With that said, I am going to go ahead and turn it over to Paul.
Right, great. Thanks for coming along. Thanks for the great introduction. I'm Paul Roberts. I'm the training manager at ITOOSoftware. So if you've ever watched any of our videos, you've probably heard my voice before. I also do some of the documentation, technical writing on the website, all kinds of other stuff. I'm joined, as we said earlier, by Jaime, who is next down there, who will be answering questions at the end. So you've actually joined us quite an exciting year for us at ITOOSoftware. Incredibly, it was about 25 years ago that two brothers from the sunny south of Spain in Cadiz decided to start a software company that would help 3D artists to do things that at the time seemed fairly impossible to do in 3D graphics. They started in 1999. And since then, their influence has kind of spread worldwide of our software. So particularly in architectural visualization, but also games and visual effects, we've got a broad user base of people for whom we are an essential part of their pipeline. But particularly, we're dominant in the architectural visualization sector. In fact, I would argue that we were instrumental in helping to pioneer architectural visualization over the last 25 years, especially in the creation of exterior 3D renders, where producing huge amounts of vegetation, grass and trees was formerly a fairly formidable task, and we removed quite a few of the barriers to making that possible. But I think it's not just removing these barriers that made us successful as a company. It's also partly because a cornerstone of what we believe in is customer service and making sure people get the most out of the plugins that you've purchased. So we have a real obsession with providing excellent support. Often you'll get questions answered from us very, very fast, but also continuing education. So we do a lot of tutorials. We spent a lot of time writing our documentation and working hard to make sure that you understand what it is that you've purchased and to help you get the most out of it. So the plugins that plugin we are best known for, and the one that started it all way back in 1999, is of course ForestPack. And this plugin came about when the guys needed to visualize a golf course, and there was no good way of doing that at the time. But since then, 10 years later, we have also released RailClone, which is a parametric modeling tool, which I'll talk about more in a minute. And we've also branched out to produce assets. So we've got two lines of assets, which is the 3D garden for plants, shrubs, ground cover, and that kind of thing, obviously tightly integrated with ForestPack, and the parametric library, which is a asset library of procedural assets that obviously ties in with RailClone. And I'll show you a little bit of both of those during this presentation. But before I do that, I just wanted to go back to ForestPack. So I mentioned that it started life as a way, it was never intended to be released commercially necessarily. It was started life as a way for the two brothers to make their work easier. They, way back in actually before 99, in the late 90s, they got the task of visualizing a golf course, which of course meant huge expanses of grass, tons of trees. And this is on the kind of technology that was around in 1999. And there was really no way to do it at that time in 3ds Max, except to kind of place trees manually, one at a time, which, you know, as you can imagine, would have been an incredibly dull and laborious and time-consuming task. But being that they were developers and had the skills to do this, they thought there is obviously a much easier way, and that is to develop a new piece of software that could take some of the load off of the artist. And thus Forest, as it was called, was born. And the other thing that was crucial at the time was that they knew this client was going to make a lot of changes to this layout of this golf course. So the whole thing needed to be procedural and needed to be easy to edit, easy to go back to, and easy to update. And that is a kind of rationale for ForestPack that has stayed all the way up to this date. You'll notice that everything in ForestPack remains procedural as possible. So you can always go back and make changes on the fly for a really fast, iterative workflow. And the other thing is these guys came from a scene where wringing the most power out of a computer was kind of the most important thing. So there was a kind of obsession with trying to make this thing work fast, make it as efficient as possible. And something ForestPack has always been known for is the ability to create an enormous amount of geometry with relatively limited computer resources. So about 10 years later, our second plugin came out, which is RailClone. And the story behind this one is similarly driven by necessity. There was perceived a gap in the market at the time to have a plugin that would do kind of street scenes. And so what the guys set about doing was to create a suite of plugins that would be used to create kind of urban environments. And that's so that you might have, for example, had a separate plugin for road markings, a separate plugin for pavements, a separate one for curbs, a separate one for street lights, a separate one for, you know, buildings, and so on and so forth. And then they realized that this was a slightly ridiculous way to go about developing these tools, because everything had to be a unique and separate plugin. Far more sensible would be to make a one plugin that was flexible enough that you could do all those things in one, and create a kind of procedural plugin that could pretty much be multi-purpose and do everything. And then instead of keeping that locked away behind some sort of, you know, password protected style wall or something like that, the idea was to give everyone access to it. So instead of getting a suite of plugins, what you've got is a very flexible multi-purpose parametric modeling tool that can be used for loads of stuff, with the opportunity for you to extend it as much as you like as well with your own styles. And that's how kind of RailClone came about. So both of these plugins come with pretty extensive sets of presets so that you can start working straight away. And what I wanted to do in the first part of this practical demonstration is to show how you can populate this scene, kindly provided by ArcVision, in order to add the foliage that you can see here. So this is a fairly sort of it's not like a house in a forest. There's not fields and swathes of vegetation, but nonetheless in scenes like this you can see that vegetation plays a big part of that, and ForestPack can be really essential for creating these kinds of scenes. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of how you can do this kind of thing with ForestPack. So this is a kind of demo and a little tutorial for people that want to get started up and running straight away. So here's our scene. And I've taken all the vegetation out of it. So as I mentioned, I'm going to use presets to do this quickly. And the way to do that is to come up here to the top here, where you can see there's a little taskbar and there's a ForestPack button. So I'll just click on that to come into creation mode. And on the right-hand side over here, you can see I've got some options. And the top one there allows me to pick a preset from the library. So I'm just going to click on that to open it up. Now in here, we've got the library that comes free with ForestPack. This is the included library. It's in 4 categories currently. There's the 2D library, which is really billboards and is kind of legacy. It's just there to support people that might have created scenes in the early noughties or something where they used 2D billboards because the renderers couldn't handle 3D geometry at the time, and they still use those scenes or operate on those scenes. No one really uses that anymore. Now we've got the 3D stuff, which are individual objects. So we've got, for example, individual trees and various stones and some stumps and various other bits and pieces in here. These here are individual objects. So when you load these into ForestPack, you'll then have to set all the rules for how they're distributed, like how densely, what kind of pattern, that kind of thing. Next one down is presets, and these are basically complete systems. So what these are all the models, but in addition, all the rules for placing them. So you get the models imported, and then you get the distribution rules as well. And all you need to do is to tell it where to scatter, basically. And that's what I'm going to illustrate in this first part of this video. So you can see we've got various different categories of objects down here. I'm going to start with some grass, in this case, layered lawns. And I just want to pick a grass preset here to use in the scene. Now, I favor these grass presets that have a little bit of brown kind of wear and tear in them. I find them much more realistic in the renders than the ones that are very, very healthy looking. I mean, maybe if you're doing a golf course, the very healthy ones, but something where there's footfall, I would go for these ones here. So I'm just going to click on that and click load selected. Now, down on the right here, I've got 2 options. I've got generate and icon mode. So in generate mode, basically what happens is I will just click on somewhere in the scene and it will use that surface to scatter on. So it picks the surface, creates the right ForestPack object and scatters it in one go. In icon mode, I draw out an icon, then later on I have to select the areas that I want to scatter on. So it's just a quicker way of doing things. So I'll just click there. Just accept these if they come up. It's just because I'm in a different measurement system. And there we go. So that has basically scattered grass over this entire area. And that is pretty much it done. Now, there are a couple of things that I can mention here. So for example, you can see the grass is going under this concrete plate here. And maybe I don't want it under this building as well. So this takes us into one of the first most important rollouts in ForestPack when you're working with presets, which is the areas rollout, which is just down here, the areas rollout. And this is basically where you tell ForestPack in this list where to scatter your geometry. And there are 2 categories of area. There are include areas, which is, you can see is here, and there's exclude areas too. So they do pretty much what you'd imagine. Include areas add to the scatter, exclude areas take away from the scatter. And so if I wanted to remove this piece of concrete here from the scatter, I would have to come along here and find an appropriate area for removing that. And you can see I've got 5 types. So I've got a spline area, an object area, a forest area, and a paint area, and then a link area, which we won't worry about today. This is an object I'm trying to exclude from. So I'm going to click on object and just zoom out so you can see it there and click on that. And you can see it removed it from there. And that's it. Done. Similarly, if I wanted to remove the grass from underneath this house, and you can see it's under this house at the moment, I could just add it as an object area and exclude it from under the house. And the cool thing about this, as I mentioned, is that everything is procedural. So if I move this around, you can see that the grass is being removed in real time as I move that around. So there's no kind of need to recalculate it once it's moved or anything like that. It's very, very fast and easy to use. You've also got other settings in here, which I won't go into in this limited time that we've got. But for example, you have got the ability to change the scale. So I could push the grass a little bit further away from the house if I wanted to, or I can put it in underneath if I need to in order to make sure it really butts up against it. So there's lots of control there. So that would be my kind of grass there. So there's various other presets. Now what I'm going to do is just sort of explore some of the different types of distribution controls you've got in addition to surfaces here. And then in the next example, we'll look at that in a little bit more detail. So let's say we wanted a hedge here. We can do that with ForestPack too. So here I'm going to create a forest object. I'm going to pick it from the library again, and we've got some presets for hedges here. And there's two types of hedges. So you can see these ones on the kind of with the kind of topiary effect. These are designed to be placed on a surface. So you can create a hedge that's literally any kind of shape that you want. But if you scroll down, you've got linear hedges like this, which are just various species of straight hedge. And these work by being placed on a spline. And so what all you do here basically is you pick your hedge like so, click on load selected. And in this case, whereas last time I used generate, this time I'm going to use icon mode. And that is because generate only works by picking surfaces and closed splines, but I want to put this on a linear spline, so I need to use icon mode. So I'll just draw an icon out in the scene like that. It will load my preset in as soon as I do that. And then if I come to my ForestPack object in the modify panel, you'll notice areas is now disabled, and that's because I'm in a different distribution mode. So I'll just go into distribution, and you can see it's in path mode there. It says path. So what I do is just add all the paths to this list that I want to create a hedge. In this case, it's that one there. And that is pretty much it. It's in a strange display mode at the moment. Let me just change this to points cloud so we can see that there is a little hedge there now. Now, I picked a small one, but that's pretty much it. I added a little hedge along that spline. And of course, just like before, this is easy to edit. I can easily pick this spline, which is under here somewhere, and change it if I want to. Just make the hedge longer. I can go around corners if I want to. I mean, you probably don't want the hedge to do that, but you get the idea. So that's hedge presets. So it's really that easy to add hedges to your scenes. So very, very straightforward. So let's have a look at a couple of other approaches now. If I come into ForestPack, this time, instead of loading a preset, what I might do is start to load individual objects, because there's not everything has a preset. So maybe I want to scatter some shrubs in this area around here or something. So let's have a look at that. So I can come into either 3D, or I've got some samples here from the 3D garden. So this is our commercial libraries, and we've got some samples that ship for free with ForestPack. So I might, for example, take this bush here and just load that up. And now I'm going to click on generate, and I'm going to click on the surface and click OK. So now I've got a lot of shrubs all over the surface, everywhere. I don't want them all over the surface. I only want them here, really. So now I need to start experimenting a little bit with my areas. So if I come into my areas rollout here, first of all, you can see the surface area is already here and it is on. What I want to do is to turn it off, because I don't actually want to use this surface to distribute, but I do need it because I want to project the grass, the bushes down onto it. So it needs to be there, but I don't want it to actually generate geometry. I just want it as an object to position the plants on the Z axis. So what I'm going to do instead is to pick a spline area, and I'm going to pick this spline. You can see it. There's a spline there from the scene, like so. Now this is an open spline here, so it's not a closed spline. So currently nothing's happening. And that's because when you use an open spline, you need to give it a thickness. And this thickness is set using this parameter here where it says thickness. You can see that just down there. So what I'll do is just give that, maybe it's a couple of meters, thickness. And that's working, as you can see, but not a lot of shrubs. And that is because my distribution is very low. So when you get into these placing plants that aren't presets, you need to set these things yourself. And so you can see the areas is where you scatter, but the distribution is the pattern that you scatter within that area. And it uses different types of maps, which we'll get into later. And then it uses a density setting. And just by dialing that down, you can see I change the density of those objects, right? So I can pull that down. I've probably got that area too large, actually. So let's just make that 1 meter. Something like that. Now it looks kind of artificial, right? Because all of these objects are the same. There's one object, and it is all rotated the same way. They're all exactly the same size. That's not really how things grow in real life. So what we want to do is to look at the next rollout down here under surfaces, which is transform, And using that, you can randomize the rotation and the scale. And I'm just turning them on here. And that breaks up the repetition of those objects. Obviously, if you add a couple more variations to that, that pretty much disappears completely. I'm not rendering, by the way, just to save a little bit of time so we can just whip through the same. Okay. Makes sense, I hope. So we've covered scattering along closed splines with the hedges, open splines here, closed splines here again with the grass, and using object include and exclude areas. There is another common scenario whereby, especially in a scene like this one, the trees might be at very fixed points. Like your architect might have said and given you markers where you specifically want to place certain types of tree. Now that is possible in ForestPack 2. And in fact, I've imagined we've got some markers here that might have been, maybe these were CAD blocks or something, or they've been imported from wherever you've been sent them. So we can place objects on those markers very easily. And you do that by, once again, coming into your library, finding some trees. So here I'm going to take this white beam, and I'm just going to create an icon here because this is not a surface distribution mode. So I'm just going to create that. Now, if I've added an object from the library in the creation phase and I want to add more objects, sorry, not to the library, to the geometry list, then you do that by going to the geometry rollout, which is here, and just clicking on the library button to open it again. And then you can just keep adding additional objects to this library. So I can go into starter library and maybe I'll add an orange tree and maybe this maple. So we just click to add those and you'll see they get added to the list. There you are. They're all in the list now. So great. So that's that done. Now, what mode is it I want here? I don't really want areas because I'm not filling a whole area. So not that rollout. What I want to go and choose an alternative distribution mode. And up here, in this little drop down, there's a reference option. Reference up there. So if I click on that, what I can now do is to come in and pick the references in the scene and add them to this list. Or I can click on this button here and open a picker and just pick them from this list. It's not those. So they're called big and small for reasons will become apparent in a second. So what I've done now, you can see, is I've scattered one tree onto each one of those markers. And the cool thing about this is that these are dynamically linked. So if later on you decide, actually, I don't want that there, you can move the marker and the tree moves. If you decide it needs to rotate a little bit, you can do that too. And they're even connected in terms of transform. So I can scale them up and down by scaling the marker. It's a very flexible way of placing individual trees. And of course, if you had architects kept updating and you had them coming in on a layer, you can link ForestPack so it scans a layer for markers too, and then automatically populates on any markers that are in a layer. Now, at the moment, this is randomized. So coincidentally, and I was kind of hoping it wouldn't do that, but there you go. Coincidentally, I've got a big tree where I want a big tree and little trees where I want little trees. But that's just purely random. So if I went into general and played with if I picked the right object, that is. Bear with me while I try and pick the correct ForestPack object. Yep, got it. So if I come into general and change the random seed, you can see I've got no real control over which trees are where. Yeah, so I could end up with massive trees where I don't want massive trees. So one of the cool things about using marker mode is that you can match the names to the markers. So you can see in my distribution rollout here at the bottom here, there is an option that says match geometry by name. And if I turn that on, what will happen is that I can basically name the objects in the geometry rollout to match the first letters of the marker. So you saw when I added them, some of them are called big something something, some are called small something something. So by naming these in here the same way, I should be able to match this up. So I think silver maple is the big one. So if I just change that to big, yeah, you saw this one updated here. This marker is called big 001, I believe. And these ones down here were larger too. And then the others would be called small something something something. Now, if there are multiple objects with the same name, it will randomize between them. So I would just call them both small. And now you can see I've got a random mixture of small markers going on the center here, which is pretty cool. So this is great, I think, for architecture where you do have these precise placements. And then you might have specific species of tree that need to be on those precise placements as well. And again, it's all easy to edit because you can move it. And then if you decided, in fact, that you wanted a different tree here, you can even rename the marker. And then when you refresh the ForestPack object, it will update as well, in theory. I probably shouldn't have played the animation bar. There we go. So it did update. Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty flexible too. So you can see ForestPack can very quickly fill a scene with vegetation using a whole load of different techniques. But what I want to do now is switch over to RailClone. And so RailClone also can add a load of stuff with splines. And one of the things I wanted to do was to look very quickly at the balconies. So you can see I've got some splines defining the edge of these balconies here. And this would be a perfect job for RailClone. RailClone's great for balconies. So what you would do here is just pop open RailClone. And with RailClone, it doesn't have a library button. So you always need to draw out a gizmo first, and then come over to the modify panel, and then open the style editor, which is here. Sorry, the library browser, which is here. And now what I want to do is there's tons of libraries in here, too many to talk about now, but there's loads and loads of stuff. So we've got different cladding styles, we've got guttering styles, railings, scaffolding, escalators, like all kinds. I'm going to go for railings, and I'm looking for something like these ones here that have multiple wires going through them. But you could experiment with any of these and just hit load selected and hit OK. So what you do now in here is you just need to go down to the base objects rollout, which is down here on the right hand side, and you should see a spline listed. All you need to do is to pick a spline from the scene, and it will generate all of your railings on the balconies. Let me just change this to quick mesh mode so maybe we can see it. There we go. So you can see here, with that one click, I've added balconies to the whole building, including the curved balconies here. It's very, very powerful. Also, as we've mentioned, this is a procedural tool. And so I'm just going to switch back to points cloud. So we've also got a few parameters here as well. Maybe I don't want that height. I want it to be a bit higher or a bit lower. You can easily change that just by dialing it in. Or maybe I want fewer wires or more wires. You can do that too. So this is a nice, cool procedural object that very quickly adds balconies there. We can also do things to the roads. I mentioned it started life as a set of plugins for generating kind of urban furniture and roads and curbs and so forth. So some simple objects that you can add very quickly. Maybe we want something like an island down the center of the road. So we create a RailClone object, load it from the library. And this time, let's come down and look in traffic. And I'm going to use just a concrete barrier just for illustration. I'll load that up. Just accept whatever the messages are. And then once again, it's a simple case of coming down to base objects and just clicking to add it in the scene. We've got my geometry going down there. You can see it fits the spline. I could also add some streetlights, for example. So I might do the same thing again to add some streetlights. And there's tons of streetlights styles in here, but I'm just going to pick something fairly old school. And once again, just add it to the path. And there you can see, if I change the quick, let's try it. Points cloud, there we go. You can see it a little bit clearer in points cloud. You can see now I've got streetlights going the whole run of the road there. So that's pretty powerful too, just for quickly populating roads. When it gets really interesting is when you get to the advanced RailClone styles. So for example, we might want a background building here. We could create a background building there. We can make it any shape really. Maybe it's sort of a bit like a wedge shape. And then we can open an object in RailClone. And this time I'm going to use one of our parametric library objects. So these are the additional purchases that you can buy for RailClone that basically include more advanced RailClone objects. So for example, I'm going to pick a style from here. It really doesn't matter which. Let's go for that one and load that up. Then once again, base object roller, tell it where to go. We'll just pick that spline there. We have a building. Let me just change it to quick mesh mode so we can see it. We have a building there. So it's fairly simple. You've got loads of parameters for controlling that. So I've got, I'm just going to turn the stories variation down because that's a kind of randomization. And then I can control the number of floors here. 5, 6, whatever. You've got materials you can change for everything here. You can turn the lights on and off. You can limit by material IDs and so on and so forth. And you can really quickly fill out the background of a scene. Clearly, your foreground would be the main show, but when you're just filling out the background of things, then you don't necessarily need to do a whole load of modeling. You can simply draw a spline and add a RailClone object and then go from there. So I'm just doing one more here. It's a building I particularly liked that I can't find now. Let's go with that one. And you can see, like, I'm filling this scene very, very quickly with these presets. Pick the spline. It's there somewhere. It's huge. So we'll just set the floors again. And quick mesh. It should give us that. This is an interesting one. This building is inside out, and that's just because I need to reverse the spline. If that ever happens. There we go. So yeah, so you can see in this scene, I've pretty quickly got that all going. I've added a load of stuff that's not in the render, clearly. But you can see how quick and easy it is to start filling those things out. So I know I'm running out of time already. So I did have another little bit of the tutorial of this presentation I wanted to talk to, which was how to sort of go about creating your own styles and your own scatters. So I'm going to do a little bit of that, maybe just one or two. I'm not going to be able to do this whole scene, but just to show you how this works by picking a couple of things from the scene. So let me open a new file. While we wait for this, it'd be a good time to think of some questions if you've got any. Okay, so here we are. This is a simple scene, no vegetation in it whatsoever. I just wanted to pick a few things. So the thing is sometimes people think you're limited to the objects that are in the library, and that isn't the case. You can use assets from anywhere at all. Pretty much ForestPack can scatter anything. That includes RPCs, obviously, but also objects from the Chaos library. So if you've got V-Ray or Corona, you've got this fairly comprehensive library now. All of that is fair game for our plugins. You can use any of that. Mega scans, assets you get from anywhere, basically. And so I just wanted to illustrate quickly how that's done. Here I've just picked these 3 trees, and I'm also going to mention briefly some of the surface controls, the additional surface controls. So here's another quick start tip. If I've picked 3 trees first, and then I click the ForestPack button, make sure nothing is picked in the library, and turn on this button here, which is populate from selection, what happens then is that I can basically go into generate mode and click on a surface, and it's going to create a new ForestPack object, put those 3 trees in the geometry list, and assign the surface all in one go. It's a really quick way of taking something that's seen and assigning it to something. Now we're in here, we've basically got to set these distribution rules ourselves. So this is how you create your own rules. And we have the top 5 rollouts at the top here, probably the only ones you're going to need 90% of the time. So for a start, we might set our density to be a little bit less dense. So we can come out here a little bit so you can see now the individual trees a bit more. But you can also change the patterns. So you've got various different distribution patterns here. If you wanted some gaps in your scatter, so you've got more like clearings and things, then you can choose a different distribution pattern. It's a really great way of flexibly kind of creating more realistic scatters rather than an even spread of objects. So that takes care of, let's say, the distribution. Now, once again, we always need to randomize it. And the preset values are always pretty good, I think. So I just generally just turn those on. And then in the areas rollout, you might have additional areas. We might add on top of this extra splines and so forth, but I'm not worried too much about that now. What I'm interested in just quickly showing are the additional controls you've got in surfaces. So in the surface rollout, you've got a few things. First of all, you've got a direction slider. And at the moment, you can see as much as you can see with the points cloud, but you can see all of the trees are facing straight up. Now, if I slide that towards normal, what happens is those trees start to follow the surface normal instead. Or you can go the other way and point them downwards, which is not necessarily useful in this case, but for scattering on ceilings and things could be. You can go somewhere in between. And then you've got various control surfaces here like altitude range. So if I turn on altitude range limited and take this top value down, what I can do is just stop the trees from growing at a certain height, right? So you can see, I'm just going to take the top one down a bit as well. You can see that I can control the range on that slope that trees are growing on. So I want to go all the way up to the top, or I can come all the way down. Yeah, just based on altitude. Now, where this gets even more interesting is when you combine it with fall-off graphs. So these are really powerful features that allow me to control, for example, the scale and the density based on their position between this altitude range. So you can see this is the bottom of the altitude range on the left-hand side of the graph and the top on the right. And what will happen is if I take the left-hand side down, it will get more sparse at the bottom, going up to full density at the top, or I can do it the other way around, like so, and take it up to full density at the top. So you've got lots of control here. And the difference with it being a graph and just not like a linear fall off is that you can actually do quite creative things with it, like create kind of jagged fall off graphs that then you end up with a kind of line going through the distribution that gives you this kind of maybe more natural layout where trees may or may not be growing up in layers. And that kind of thing. And you can do the same thing with scale too. So I can also change the scale. So I could have smaller trees at the bottom, for example, growing up to larger trees at the top. So there's loads of control there for creative uses for using your altitude. So I just wanted to mention those. You can also do it based on slope range. So the angle of the mountain as well, but I won't get into that now because time is short. Cool. So I always work big to small personally. I find that the bigger things you're scattering have the most effect on the composition. So rather than start with the grass, which basically is cosmetic and has little effect on the composition, I like to work with trees first. Other people do it the other way around, matter of taste. But one thing I wanted to mention, particularly of composition, is how important often that final fine tuning can be. And what that can mean is that you need to position trees quite precisely. Now, you've seen one way you can do that with using markers or kind of like CAD blocks or something like that. But you can also just do it directly in ForestPack. So you can, once you've done your kind of procedural scatter, you can come into ForestPack's item editor mode and switch it to custom edit. And then in custom edit mode, you can actually pick up individual trees and move them around like so. So you could move them, into the foreground of the scatter, and then really frame the scene, which you'll notice here I've done by putting these trees right around the edge of the camera. And that was done by manually positioning the trees. Then you can just move them around and then change which tree is displaying in the items editor mode. Where is it? There it is. Just change the tree by picking it from the drop down list. So you've got loads of control here for just really perfecting that composition, which I haven't got time to kind of fiddle with now, but that is pretty much how that would work. If you've there's like in the Chaos Cosmos library, there are quite a few handy grass patch presets, and you'll notice that when you get grass presets, same with Megascans, when you get grass presets, they tend to be patches like this rather than individual or small plants. And the reason for that is because these cover a bigger space, patch of ground, and so you need fewer of them. So instead of ending up with like 50 million plants, you might end up with a few tens of thousands. So it's a much more efficient way of doing it. But, there is a trick to creating a good preset, which I just wanted to come up with, show you now with these objects. And the way to do that again is I've got the 3 selected, ForestPack object, populate from selection is on, generate is on. I'm just going to pick a surface and just let that go. Right. So the most efficient way to scatter ground cover is to change your distribution mode to full. Right, it creates a grid-like pattern, but what it means is that there are no pixels that are black that are being calculated as a gap. So it's the fastest and most efficient way of doing it. And then all you need to do is to dial this value down until the plants overlap. Let me just change my display to 0. So you just dial this down until all the plants just about overlap and there are no gaps between them. And then come into transform, turn on rotation, this time setting the minimum and maximum XY to 0. So because they're like manhole covers, right? And if they're tilted upwards, you're going to see the edge of them. And so you need to make sure that doesn't happen by turning that rotation off. Do, however, animate the scale. And crucially, because we created a grid-like pattern, animate the translation a bit. So they'll wobble around a little bit and it breaks up the grid so you don't see it in the renders. And that's pretty much the trick to creating ground cover. So if you've got these patches from somewhere, like maybe they're from Chaos Cosmos or maybe Megascans or an RPC or something like that, you can very quickly turn them into very efficient ground cover and cover huge areas with it. And then again, I'm running out of time. I'm aware I'm talking too much already. Like you can then obviously add all your areas to remove the grass from where you don't need it. So removing spline areas and that kind of thing. It's very quick and easy. So I'm conscious of the time, so I'm going to move on quickly. There's loads more we could talk about there. I have to do another one. But I wanted to not to miss our big announcement of late, which is a brand new plugin, which is called ForestIvy. And we sort of saw a gap in the market here whereby, yes, there have been Ivy plugins, but they're all based on the same algorithm, essentially in 3ds Max. And it's a good algorithm. It looks fantastic, but it's not fast and you have to wait for it to grow. And that makes it slow to iterate on. It makes it slow to kind of art direct. And so we wanted to create something that was very fast and that could almost work in real time. And so our answer to this is ForestIvy, which is in ForestPack 9, which is currently in beta. And I'll just show you quickly how it works. Now, this won't actually take very long because like most of our tools, it's very simple and easy to use. So here it is. It's ForestIvy. You basically draw out an icon in the scene, come over to the modify panel, and all you do, just like we've seen with all the others, is just open a preset. Now this currently is down here because I haven't added it yet. We've got 30 presets shipping with the initial release, from standard ivy to roses, all kinds of things, jasmine, peppermint, sweet peas, that kind of stuff. I'm going to pick a rose, I think. So I'm going to pick a red rose and I'm going to load that up. And you'll see that there's very little you actually need to play with this. All I need to do is to come down here, and the bit you'll be looking for if you're not creating one, but you're just using a library, is the growth setting here on the right hand side. And you've got a few things. So this section here is how you decide what you want to grow on and draw some initial lines. And then below that here, you've got the amount of growth. And that is pretty much all you need to play with. So I would say, for example, I want this to grow here on this object. And now I've done that. I've picked it. So this is one object. I'd come down here to baselines. And what you want to do, this is why it's really good for art direction, is I just start drawing. So I know I want ivy to grow out there, and maybe I'm going to want it to come along here as well. Oops, I kind of missed that one. So I'm just giving it a little bit of a head start. And then once you've set your baselines up, and there's a bit of growth going on already, you can basically decide how much growth do you want and just turn up the growth level. You can see it's fast, right? It's happening in real time. And even when it's at full kind of growth, you can still keep drawing and seeing it update in the viewports, drawing it exactly where you want it. It's a really cool system. It's really fun to use. And then, yeah, it's really as easy as that. And the nice thing is, once you've got it there, you can decide, do you know what? I'm not sure about that plant. Maybe I want to see what lantana looks like. Let's try and grow that instead. And without having to redraw the splines or repick the object, you can just swap it over and see a different type of plant in that same location. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, and the nice thing is, it's also, when you get into it later on, unlike some of the older algorithms, they're not too cryptic, the settings. So for example, I mean, gravity is pretty obvious. Like, it's going up at the moment. If I wanted it to go down, I just change the gravity to downwards and it pulls it down. It's an obvious setting. Adhesion, that's how much it sticks to the wall. So if I turn that up, it sticks more. If I turn it down, it sticks less. These are fairly straightforward settings to get your head around when you want to tweak the look of this ivy if you get into it. But to be honest, most people, I imagine, will use the presets. But if you want to create your own, that's how that goes. So we're really looking forward to that getting out into the wild. And finally, I just wanted to mention a couple of the other things that come with the ForestPack kind of suite of tools, which is the fact that we've got some tools for asset and scene management. And so, for example, and there are quite a few here, but for example, we've got listers included. So you can very quickly switch between ForestPack objects, change display modes, see exactly how many objects are being scattered, and jump to the relevant rollout just by clicking here. So we can do that. If you are working with people who don't have ForestPack, then you've also got the ability to convert ForestPack objects to native instances using Forest tools. So we've got Forest tools here, and this basically, I won't do it, but this will basically turn this into native 3ds Max instances, which you can share with anyone. And if you've ever downloaded scenes from vendors where you get a complete scene and there's tons of trees and things scattered around, chances are it was made with ForestPack and instantiated using that tool. And the other thing I wanted to mention was that how easy it is to add things to the library. So far we've just looked at taking things from the library. But the last thing I wanted to mention is, say you've got these lovely assets and you've sort of brought them in, and you've either modeled them or you've brought them in from another asset that you've bought or something like that, and you just like them in the ForestPack library just to make it easier to use in the future. You can really easily do that just by popping open the ForestPack library. I'm just going to create a new library to illustrate this and just give this a name. Let's call it test. And all you have to do with them selected is right click here and go to import objects from scene. And then we can just leave that default. I might increase the size of the thumbnail. And then just sit back and wait while it imports. It shouldn't take terribly long. And it creates a thumbnail of them all. And there you go. Now they're all in the library. So, and now anytime I create a new ForestPack object, now these are available to me. I don't need to hunt around, find them, load them up again. They're all ready to use in ForestPack. So that's a real time saver, and it's really good practice to get into once you've got something you really like. Just bung it in the library. The other thing you can do in the library is to actually add a preset. So this ground cover here, if I liked that with all its settings, with its distribution settings and everything else already coded in, I could import that into the library in exactly the same way. And instead of importing it as single objects where I'd need to set all those parameters again, it imports it as a preset. And all I need to do in the future is just import that whole preset into ForestPack, and it's all set up and ready to go. Ah, I was talking fast. I'm going to end there because I'm aware that I've sort of overshot my Q&A time probably a little bit. But there's loads more information on our website. As I say, we're really committed to trying to make as much information about our plugins available as possible. So there's lots of information, there's lots of tutorials, excellent documentation that you can look at there, including demos. And we've also got free light versions available. So you can download a free version of ForestPack and RailClone and just take them for a spin. It's obviously slightly feature limited, but not very feature limited. So you can really get a sense of how it works. And of course, you know, ArcVision are here to answer all your questions as well. They are resellers for us, so they know lots about ForestPack and RailClone, and will be able to help you with all your various needs. And I think we're over to Q&A.
All right, thank you so much, Paul. That was an amazing overview of ForestPack, RailClone, and introduction to ForestIvy. That was, I love flowers, so that got me all excited. So we will turn it over here to Q&A. I do know we have a couple questions we'll try to get to pretty quickly here. And just a reminder, there was so many tips and tricks and features shared today. We will be recording this. You will be able to revisit everything at a later time. So with that said, we do have our first question here from Brendan. What are the key differences between ForestPack and Chaos Scatter?
Do you want to take that one, Jaime?
Well, thanks for your time, Paul, and great to be here. Obviously, well, we've been doing this for 25 years, so we came up with the tool back then. I would say that Chaos Scatter is a minor tool inside a great tool like V-Ray, and ForestPack is a big environmental toolkit which has powerful scattering abilities in it. So pretty easy to answer. ForestPack is a standard for the market right now. I think in this case, Chaos Scatter, which I think it's been in the market for 2 years now, it still has a long way to go until they catch up. So,
and I think that's it, isn't it? We I think innovate a lot of these features. So, and we're continuing to innovate. We're starting from a different position, right? So you said about catching up, and that's it, though. Yeah, I think it's a subset of our tool, isn't it? So it's.
I think for the basic stuff, I mean, we can understand that people can kick off starting, you know, using Chaos Scatter, but or any scattering tools out there. Okay, but once you get to production, once you jump to a big studio, you're going to be, you know, required to use ForestPack. So, and I hope it goes like this, like for a long time.
Thank you. Another question is, can you share a ForestPack scene with someone who does not have the plugin?
So yeah, so I sort of demoed that very quickly at the end there. But so the way to do that is with using Forest Tools. So this one here, basically you would convert it to native instances. And what that means is, like, so I make sure I've got the actual trees here. So what that means is you basically hit this button here. It converts it to native instances, so no ForestPack plugin required, and then it will render anywhere. And that would be true too if you were maybe sending it to sort of, you know, Chaos Cloud or something like that, or sort of Linux version of V-Ray or something, because that obviously ForestPack wouldn't be supported there. So that's an option.
Let's see which other ones we have come in here. Which renders are the plugins compatible with?
Which renderers? So yeah, lots of renderers. Obviously V-Ray and Corona, but also Redshift, F-Storm, Arnold,
Octane.
Octane, yeah, Octane. Yeah, pretty much every major renderer is compatible. I think D5 is compatible too. And then pretty much most major renderers. That's one of our big like talking about what's the difference. That's one of the differences, is that we do support obviously renders outside the Chaos ecosystem. So yeah, there's quite a few there. Just trying to think if I've missed one. I think I think they're the main. If you can think of a render I've missed, let me know. But I think that's the main ones.
Okay, let's see. We may have time for one or two more questions here. Apologize if we missed the answer for this one that came in. Is ForestIvy a separate purchase?
No, ForestIvy is a part of ForestPack 9. So it's a whole new plugin, but it's in ForestPack 9, which is currently out in beta, and it's at no additional cost. So that is
which is coming out. It will be coming out in a few weeks. So ForestPack 9 should be out. The official version, Max 25 compatible, should be out in 2-3 weeks maximum.
Paul, is there accessibility to the beta program at this point still, or is it closed off?
The beta program is available to anyone who has an active maintenance plan. So you don't need to apply or anything if you've got an active maintenance plan, or if you buy ForestPack now, you have access immediately to the beta. And the beta is stable. You know, it's not out yet because we're doing some other bits and pieces behind the scenes, things like the library for Ivy, but the actual beta itself is solid and ready to use. So little risk in installing it.
Fantastic.
There's an important thing regarding water maintaining plans is for us. We are committed to perpetual licensing. So if you purchase the software is going to work forever. So you buy a license. The license includes 1 year of maintenance, which gives you pretty much access to premium support and any kind of updates. Once that year goes by, you can either renew that maintenance plans or just stay like you are, and then the plugin will work forever. So I mean, that's an important thing nowadays, in which subscriptions are everywhere. I think that's part of our commitment to our users, in the sense that you purchase the plugin is going to work forever, and I think that's important to mention.
Yeah, thank you.
You agreed.
Yep.
I think that was all the questions that I had. I know we are just about at the hour. Corey, was there anything else that popped in on your radar to?
No, but I see Paul's pulling up Vantage right here. And
Yeah, I just
cool.
realized I forgot to mention in the renders part, and since I had it here, that ForestPack is supported by Chaos Vantage and RailClone, for that matter. I don't know whether it's liking me streaming while I'm doing this, but I'm trying to get this going. But you should see that this works with a live link. If I just come back to here, yeah, so you can see it's working straight through with no adjustment, pretty much there, which is pretty cool. It also, so some plugins support us rather than we support them, if you see what I mean. It's just depends whether they're locked down or not. So another piece of software that supports us is Unreal. So the Datasmith plugin natively exports ForestPack and RailClone to Unreal without you having to convert it to native instances first. So you can just leave those as they are and do a Datasmith export, and it all should just work, hopefully. But I just wanted to mention that. So two of the big real-time, kind of current real-time engines are both supporting ForestPack and RailClone, which is the advantage of being the industry standard, I guess, for so long.
And the other one, which I'll say, is democratized, right? You guys are not stuck under Chaos's technology. You guys are out there spreading your wings and can go across multiple products, multiple rendering engines, and it's awesome. Cool.
Right. Well, I think that just about wraps everything up. Thank you, everybody, again for joining us today. If you have any questions, please direct them over to our way. We will help answer anything. And if we need to, we can chime in with the ITOOSOFT team as well. So I thank you both, Paul and Jaime, for joining us here today. And with that, everybody have a great rest of your day.